Hi guys, in this video I'm gonna talk about ransomware prevention. Not protection, this will be in another video because those are two different things. So we're gonna talk about risk treatment, threat prevention, risk likelihood reduction, and some technical controls you can implement to prevent the, the security risk. So for the risk treatment, we're going to talk about risk mitigation. We're going to use technical security controls, administrative security controls, or physical security controls. So in this video, I'm more going to talk about technical security controls in order to mitigate the risk. And for the access control categories, you've got prevention, protection, detection, response, and recovery. And we're going to talk about prevention in this video. So, threat prevention, it's all about reducing the likelihood of a risk by implementing administrative, physical, and technical control in order to reduce the probability of a vulnerability being exploited. So it consists of mitigating the risk by applying a countermeasure to the vulnerability, or by correcting the risk by fixing or patching the vulnerability. So those are two different things that you can use in order to reduce the likelihood of a risk. So to make it short, it's to avoid or prevent that something is going to happen to you. So it's not happening yet. We're going to prevent it from ever happening. So for the risk likelihood reduction, you've got the mitigation and the correction. So for the vulnerability or risk mitigation, you're going to apply a countermeasure to the vulnerability. So the vulnerability is still present, but it can't be exploited or is harder to get exploited. So for example, you've got a NAS package, which is vulnerable to a remote code execution attack, which will allow an attacker to take control of your NAS, execute commands, and execute a ransomware, for example. And you can mitigate or reduce the risk by applying a specific web application firewall or intrusion prevention system rule until a patch is available in order, to block the attack. Now for the vulnerability correction, so you're going to apply a patch for this vulnerability that is going to completely correct it. So the vulnerability is no more present and it therefore can't be exploited. So for example, we still have our RCE attack, which will allow an attacker to take control and execute a ransomware, for example. And the package developer has published a patch that corrects the vulnerability. So now you're protected, and if you had a mitigation rule, for example, you can just delete it. Now, technical controls for the prevention. So in this scenario, the NAS, the Synology NAS, has to be reachable over the internet. Okay, so it's not only in a LAN, it has to be reachable over the internet. So the first very important thing is to build a secure architecture, and you might need some extra software and hardware. The NAS is not going to be able to answer all those security controls and needs because it's not its primary purpose. Okay, so for the next two slides, what is in yellow is what the NAS can do, and which is in white, it's what you need an extra layer of software or hardware. So in order to build a secure architecture, you can watch my video on the architecture comparison, but in essence, you should put your NAS in its own LAN where you can control everything that is going in and out of this network. You should not allow direct traffic to the NAS. You've got to intercept all protocols that can be used behind a reverse proxy and a web application firewall. Most of the protocols we can do that for the standard packages, except for DS Cloud because it's a proprietary protocol, and I've tried, but I cannot intercept it. It has to go directly. You have to use a network intrusion prevention system, use a network antivirus, and you have to filter incoming and outgoing traffic to the strict necessary. You don't need a port, you close the port. You are gonna see on the last slides some example of what I'm talking about. And you can use also the web control and application control feature and whitelist again to the strict necessary. I'm gonna show you a print screen after, but of course this is not a NAS security control that you can implement. Now you can also use geographical IP restriction if possible, so this can be done on the NAS. Do not expose services that don't need to be exposed, okay? So if you don't need to expose the SMB port over the internet, well, close it in this case. Do not expose administrative interfaces to the internet. So if you've got administrative tasks over SSH or over the DSM web interface, just don't expose it over the internet. You can use a dedicated VPN server, which use the OpenVPN technology if you want. So don't use the VPN server package of Synology. You have to have a dedicated box for this. And you can use also an SSL VPN as a bastion. So it means that you will open a page on your security device, and from there you can access your system through HTTP or SSH, for example. There are a lot of different things that you can do. I'm not going to go into the details. Use only encrypted protocols. Do not use Quick Connect or Synology DDNS. You can watch my video on that. Always use signed certificates, and prefer to not host a public-facing website on the same NAS than the one storing confidential data. So if you've got a WordPress package on your NAS and you've got, any kind of public that can access this page because it's a public website, just don't store any confidential data on this one because, for example, the WordPress package has some vulnerabilities. It's even more if you use some add-ons or plugins, and it's public, so you never know what could happen. So just don't do that if you can. Now, for the rest, this is more also on the NAS. It's not in yellow anymore. So always apply the latest operating system and packages updates. Apply OS and packages hardening and best practices. So you should change the default ports for any kind of Synology application, and for the administrative access over SSH and the DSM web interface. Always disable unused and unsafe services. So that means SMB v1 and v2. For example, those are unsafe or less safe than the SMB v3, for example. If you do not need Telnet, disable Telnet. Disallow unauthenticated services. So if you don't need any kind of guest services like WebDAV has an anonymous login. Well, this is some kind of authenticated service, but just don't use anything that is anonymous related or does not need any kind of authentication. Use only Synology approved packages. Don't use the NAS VPN server package, and avoid using NAS as a proxy or reverse proxy. So you don't have direct connection from the internet to your NAS, or just don't do it if you don't need it. It's preferable to have a special dedicated box for this. Now, what do we have? We have also for the part 2, you should disable guest account and change default admin account. You can use two-factor authentication, use a strong password policy, and enable IP auto block and account protection. Some of those things are on the hardening video. Now, on the personal computer, of course, you've got some things that you can do. I will not go into too many details because, well, there's a lot of you can do. So always apply operating system and software updates, apply OS hardening and best practices, always use user account control on Windows. So don't deactivate the UAC, because if you're using an administrator account, you will be a permanent admin, so malicious code can be executed in an easier way. Of course, always use an antivirus with the PC and a firewall, and always configure it for real-time scan and also scheduled scan. Now it's also to another thing is that you can protect your user or the personal computer by using the antivirus that comes with the NAS, so the antivirus essentials or the McAfee. In some scenarios only we can consider the use of this antivirus as prevention, but as it's not a real-time antivirus, it's not a real prevention. The scenario in which it can be a prevention is, for example, you've got a lot of users or external users putting files on the NAS, and you are going to prevent your users to execute a malware by doing some regular antivirus scan on the NAS. So this is some kind of prevention, but it's not the best because it's not a real-time antivirus anyway. So yes, so you got to schedule antivirus scans on your NAS, and you can use the security advisor, but this may be more of a detection feature. I've written down what you can detect, but I'm not sure that what it will do if it detects something. Will it just say that you've got something that is wrong, or will it be able to correct the situation? This I do not know because I never went into this problem so far. Now, as I said, you should use a secure architecture like I have presented in my architecture video, which means that you have a special software / hardware box, which I'm using myself. It's a free system, and you should try to harden your system the best you can by restricting protocols, restricting what you can do. So for example, we said before that for the firewall rules, you've got to filter everything that is going in and going out. So I'm not showing a picture of that because I think this is self-explanatory. And you can also use some web control feature on this security system. So for example, my NAS, I'm going to block all content. I'm going to block spyware infection and communication. I've got some categories that I have created that we don't see here, but anyway, everything is blocked. Okay, so the NAS cannot go on the internet on uh, every port. I'm only allowing some very specific port, for example, and everything that is web related, it's going through the proxy. Okay, so this is a proxy, it's going through this, and I'm controlling everything. So I'm blocking everything. Now I'm using a whitelisting approach where I'm going to allow some websites because the NAS needs it, or because I need it. If, for example, I need it because I would like to have some subtitles with my DS video package, I need to allow the opensubtitles.org website. Use a network antivirus. So still in everything that is related to a web service, it is going to use a network antivirus scanning. Okay, I'm also blocking potentially unwanted application. I have a scan limit, and I'm also disabling any kind of active content in order to have a better security. Now for the application control, as you can see here, I've got my first rule where I'm going to allow my NAS to communicate to those applications or services. So HTTP, HTTPS, and everything. I've got also a WAF allowed because I am going to receive from the internet, I'm going to receive HTTPS and SSL, so I need to allow this. And for the third rule, I'm going to block every kind of other application. So you see, I'm going in a defense in depth I'm working in defense in depth. You know, everything that I can do, I'm going to implement it. Because of course, if you are going to block only ports, for example, you can have a malware that is going to use the port that you are already allowing, for example, so you do not recognize the real application behind. Now we can go a step further by implementing a proxy and using web control, because it's going to know on which website you are going to connect, and you can block it if it is known to be malicious, for example. And you're going even one step further by allowing the security system to understand and to detect what kind of protocol or application you're using, because every time you're going to use an application, the system is going to check the behavior of this protocol, and when checking the behavior of the protocol, it's going to detect that you're using this kind of application, and how this is how it can detect that it is this application, even if it's using an alternative port. Okay, so if you are doing SSL over a port that is not the 443, it's going to detect and apply the allowing rule, for example. And now for the intrusion prevention system, okay, so this is fairly easy. I've just activated for all the networks. It's going to scan for any kind of suspicious attacks, for example. I did not show the attack patterns, but it's going to detect anything that is web related, mail services related, and I really don't remember the rest. There's a lot of rules. It's using Snort as an IPS, if I'm not mistaken. You've got anti-DOS flooding, you've got anti-port scan, everything, etc., etc. So a lot of stuff that you can do with it. You've got also the web application firewall. So here I'm just showing you two of the application. I've got the note station and the photo station. So I'm going to, let's say for the note station, for example, I'm going to listen on my reverse proxy for anything that is going, you know, my domain colon 443 for the port. If it sees this, it's going to redirect the traffic to the IP of my NAS and on the port 8024. Okay, so this is how it works. So I'm really using only one port that is exposed outside. It's going to be the 443, and then I've got a lot of ports inside with my NAS, and I am redirecting everything to the correct service, and it works just perfectly. Okay, I think this is the last slide. Here it's just to show you what the web application firewall can do. So you've got an antivirus for if you are going to use the web application firewall. You can block unscannable content, use the antivirus in uploads and downloads. You can block clients with a bad reputation. So I think that if you try to connect through the Tor network, it might be able to block it. You got some common threat filters, rigid filtering. So this, you might have some false positive if you do that. Of course, you've got to skip some rules, because it's going to how do you say that, if you apply just like this, you will not be able to connect yourself to the NAS because some things are a normal behavior. And the threat filter categories, you've got protocol violations, protocol anomalies, request limits, HTTP policy, bad robot, SQL injection, XSS attacks, etc., etc. So very, very practical, very powerful. This little box can do a lot of things. It can allow you to have a secure architecture. If you are geeky enough, it may not be that hard to implement. I've got, of course, a lot of other security features, or specific configuration that I can't show you because it would take hours. But there you go. Everything that I have presented you can protect yourself not only against ransomwares, but also against generic malware or attacks. So just don't expose your NAS over the internet like this. Really really try to implement some defense in depth and some best practices. Well, I hope this video has been informative for you. If you liked it, just put a like and don't forget to subscribe to support me. Thank you. Bye bye.